You're listening to the Feed Your Wild podcast, a conscious lifestyle show about all things nourishing for your body, mind, and soul. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join me for candid conversations with changemakers, exploring health and wellness, food as medicine, intuition and spirituality, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and feed all parts of your wild self. Hey there, welcome back to Feed Your Wild. I'm your host, Vanessa Rodriguez, functional nutritionist, Akashic soul record reader and channeler, and intuitive nourishment guide. Today, I thought we could take a look at a concept that I think, especially lately, the past few years, has really gotten into the mainstream, and there's a lot of trends and misconceptions around it. And that is holistic medicine and holistic healing. So I wanted to take a look at what is true holistic medicine. And I also acknowledge that I am but one person with my own biases, my own experience, and limited understanding of many different things. So I don't pretend to have all the answers, and I am not speaking from the place of being a complete expert on this topic of holistic medicine, but I am speaking from the place of a practitioner and also a human being that has experienced what I could consider the antithesis of a holistic medicine, as well as variations of holistic medicine in my own life, tending to my own health. And of course, as a practitioner and a holistic healer, I really strive to continue to seek out what is it that really makes holistic medicine holistic and supportive for not just the individual, but for the collective. And so these thoughts have been running through my mind for a long time. And I think that especially in today's world, with so much that is being experienced on a massive collective level around health. So yes, of course, with COVID and the collective journey of looking at how that has impacted us on all levels, from the physical to the emotional, mental, and spiritual, but also what has been going on and increasing over really the past decade, which is chronic illness. And so many various types of chronic illness have been on the rise continuously. We continue to have things like cardiovascular disease and diabetes and obesity being extremely common and pervasive, and still the top reasons for illness and death in the world, really now. And sort of this globalization of chronic dis-ease, even in places where they had not seen that before. So I'm looking at it through this context. And in my experience in the holistic health field over the past decade, now, for those who are maybe first-time listeners or don't know my own story or who I am or what I do, I am a trained functional nutritionist. I'm a licensed dietitian nutritionist and a certified nutrition specialist. So those are sort of like the certified licensed titles that I carry. But I have been a holistic health coach for the past decade, in addition to my functional nutrition work. And functional nutrition is just a branch from functional medicine. For anyone who is not interested in that, I recommend you check out the Institute for Functional Medicine at IFM and find out more there. There's lots of wonderful practitioners. And I also am an intuitive and Akashic record reader and channeler. And I combine the intuitive work and the spiritual advisory work and guidance work along with the clinical work that I have been doing. So that's what I've been doing for that combination really for the past 8 years. And I have worked in various sectors. So I have done work with the allopathic side of medicine and nutrition and, working with cases of, for example, autoimmunity, various kinds of GI gastrointestinal issues from IBS to Crohn's and ulcerative colitis to various manifestations of metabolic imbalances and disorders, including diabetes and obesity. And then more recently, in the past 4 years, have been working more with cognitive decline, including Alzheimer's and dementia, and working more in a functional and clinical realm with that, although also utilizing lifestyle and diet and herbs and really focusing on that within the clinical sense. So I've worked with various clinics, with various doctors, MDs, NDs, chiropractors, and the like. But I have also done a lot of work outside of those circles and more in the field of intuitive and energetic medicine. And that has been more within my own private practice. So that's just to kind of give you a little bit of overview of where I'm coming from. And I have seen over, again, the past decade, more and more chronic, complex cases arise, especially in the last 4 to 5 years. So now, 8 to 10 years ago, I would have someone come in, I work with them, we clean up their diet, we bring in some herbal support, supplements, lifestyle shifts, some coaching here and there, and they're good and they see a big difference. Nowadays, it is very interesting to see just how complex, chronic, and almost resistant to some of these basic shifts and changes that I see that people are coming in with now. And it's not just myself when I speak to colleagues and other practitioners and guests that I have on the podcast. It's very clear. Everybody is seeing this. So the toolkits that a lot of people had a decade ago are no longer enough for what we're dealing with today. And these are folks that have literally done all the things and they're still not seeing results. So they have done the elimination diets and all different kinds of therapeutic diets. They have been on herbs and supplements. They have done a lot of different testing. They are not seeing shifts and changes as they would have expected. Of course, we have to also look at the context of the world that we are living in. And we could say that our world is continuously becoming toxic, increasingly toxic. And current generations are dealing with compounded issues. So compounded traumas and lineages of disease carried through their family line, literally carried through their human genetic family line. And also the pervasive toxicity that is just in our environment that continues to increase. So it is known in many different studies, this is very documented, that many things are moving through intergenerationally and compounded by the generation. So for example, heavy metal toxicity or carrying of plastic. Now, how scary it is to see just all of the compounds, the foreign and toxic compounds that are found in fetal cords, in umbilical cords, and in fetuses. Currently, a lot of those compounds and elements that they're discovering, they don't even know what they are. Like some of these plastics or some of these chemicals that are being used, widely used by many companies, and they don't need to disclose them. They don't need to disclose what it is they're using in their products or dumping into the environment, are inevitably getting into the system and our bodies because nothing is siloed. We're all interconnected in this web of life. And so we're seeing this coming inside of the bodies of new generations and new babes. Now, this is where the grandparent can be like, when I was your age and like doing all the things that, and they're like, well, the kids nowadays are weak and they can't keep up, or they're like the immune systems, they're getting sick all the time. Perhaps your grandparents were able to smoke their entire lives and be totally fine. And nowadays that's not gonna fly for most people. And that's because the generations living today and the younger folks are literally born into a higher toxic load that they are carrying themselves, and that is also pervasive in the environment. So I just have to name that because I think it's really important to honor like what it is that we're all exposed to and we're experiencing. And it's not our fault. It's not your fault if you are sick and you have been doing all the things and you're not feeling better. So I really want to bring that home. And I know this all sounds doomsday and like I'm starting off with this kind of heavy news, although I feel like most of us already know this. It is possible to reverse a lot of these chronic diseases and illnesses. And it is possible to start to clean up our own internal environment and what I call ecology, and we'll go more into that today, but also our external ecology and our environment. But it really takes deeper shifts to happen, and it needs to happen today. So the other thing that I want to name is that I am also feeling and seeing that there are many more sensitive souls, highly sensitive souls coming through in this time. So a lot of the people that I've been seeing over the past 4 to 5 years, these were not folks that were like in their later years and experiencing chronic illness, although I absolutely have been working with elder folks who, for example, with cognitive decline and a lot of other issues. But I have been seeing mostly younger people in their 20s, even teens, experiencing these chronic illnesses. So what I am seeing, especially when I'm working within the Akashic Records and with them on an intuitive level, that so many of these souls are coming in pre-wired to be sensitive, and that these folks can feel deeply on multiple levels, which is both an incredible gift. I mean, a lot of these folks are psychic, are able to tune in and communicate, even if they're not consciously doing any of those things. There is potential predisposition, you could say, to experiencing increased challenges, pain, and hardship, especially if you don't know that you're this sensitive and you haven't been taught the tools to support yourself. You're born into this world that has this increased toxicity, and yet you are able to still protect and clear your energy field and your body. And we have really been taught, educated out of these innate faculties and processes. And this is a message that I continue to get with our Akashic readings. So if you're not familiar, I do Akashic soul nourishment readings for the Feed Your Wild podcast for the collective every month. And if you've tuned in or if you haven't, I encourage you to go back and listen to past monthly episodes because they're not just for that month. They all have perennial messages and insights for folks listening and tuning in. But one of the through line messages that has consistently come in is really remembering who we are as humans, what it is to be human. And part of what it is to be human is to connect back in with these innate faculties that you could call our intuitive and psychic and energetic. That's part of being human. It's not something that is alternative. It's part of our nature. And so having an understanding of how to work with that, and so many indigenous lifeways understood this. Like we'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. But we literally have been educated out of it. And for some folks, it's been beaten out of the culture and the bodies and the lineages. So we need to come back to that. And it really is my belief that we need to remember our innate capacity for tending to all of our bodies, but especially our energy bodies, the portions of the body that we don't see with our eyes, and really nourishing, protecting, and clearing on a regular basis. And that is what it is to truly be human. And you could say preventative maintenance. Okay, so with that context sort of established, I want to now get into the topic of holistic medicine. And I think it's important to talk about what it is not first, and then we'll go into some pillars that I believe really are that really describe what true holistic medicine is. So first, what is it not? Well, number one, it's not about dogma or trends. And yes, this includes those trends that even seem really supportive and even alternative, like clean eating, detoxing, fasting, yoga, herbalism, and various other alternative treatments. Now, all of those things can be absolutely helpful, right? Of course, we know this, but so many of them can be prescribed and practiced in one-dimensional allopathic ways. What do I mean by that? A lot of times these things can become trendy, and rather than looking at root issues or even looking at the person, looking at yourself, and is this the right practice or remedy or treatment for myself? We instead jump on the bandwagon of the latest trend. And I have seen this, my goodness, as a nutritionist over and over again. The latest ones being the ketogenic diet and the carnivore diet. Not to bring anybody down who is doing those and seeing amazing results. And I myself have worked with people on incorporating that into their lifestyle. But it has to work for you. It's not about anything dogmatic that this is the answer, the magical pill. There are also a lot of really gnarly and inappropriate ways of doing these types of diets and other practices like fasting or using herbalism in a allopathic way. And we see this a lot, especially in the clinical setting. You know, when I went to my master's program, when I was doing my master's program for human nutrition and functional medicine, we had some courses on herbalism, although it wasn't called such. It was called phytotherapy, right? And we had this textbook that was named Rational Phytotherapy. So literally extracting out so much of the soul and the aliveness, the vital force of these plants that we'll talk about a little bit more, and reducing them down to singular compounds and standardizations and extracted chemicals from these particular plants, and that's what's working. And so I have to name this because I think there's a huge surge, especially in the mainstream, around these trends and dogma around these trends. And there's a lot of marketing around it. There's a lot of also shame and guilt. There's still such a, you could say, like a patriarchal, colonized version of these things that they're taken out of context and made to be marketed and sold. So it's really important that you know that is not the same as true holistic medicine. And it could be a great starting point for somebody who is interested in moving away from maybe just conventional allopathic mainstream medicine and can be sort of the gateway into this world of holistic medicine. But I think it's really important that it's so much more than that. Holistic medicine is not seeing a lack of results as failure or anything that needs to be fixed. I still hear practitioners today saying, oh, I can fix you, or I can fix that right up, or don't worry, we just need to fix this. You'll be fixed right up, okay? People are not broken. People are not broken machines that need to be fixed. There's no fixing necessary, no matter how broken you may feel. And no one can fix you. We all have the capacity to heal. And I'll talk about healing in my sort of definition of healing, which is not equivalent to finding a cure. But we all have the capacity to heal. This is innate in our design. It may look different for different folks and different seasons of their lives, but we all have the capacity to do so. And you are not broken, no matter how broken you may feel. So holistic medicine is not about fixing you or fixing anything. Okay, so I'm getting off my soapbox around that. And I want to get into what I believe are some pillars. Now, this is not an expansive, all-inclusive list. These are just some pillars that really came to mind for me when I tuned into what I believe holistic medicine really is. And number one, it is heart medicine. Now, this is both from the practitioner and the receiver of the medicine. It doesn't matter so much the modalities or that a person practices intuitive work or spiritual work or any of that consciously or even intentionally. What matters above all those things is the state of the heart of both the giver of information and medicine and love and the recipient. The level of compassion and openness of the practitioner or the healer is one of the most healing components of the relationship. And I think it's important to know that we are talking about relationship here. When anytime we're talking about heart medicine, it means there is relationship established because that is how the world works. There are lots of studies that actually show how much the care, the level of compassion, and how the recipient of that, like their perspective of their experience with the practitioner and how they felt being with them and how held they felt, how much that actually impacts and increases the efficacy of whatever modality, treatment, remedy they are provided and receiving, and that they see better results. This makes sense, right? You are coming together and connecting in a field through the heart. Now, the heart is a portal. The heart is one of the most important aspects when we're looking at healing. It is both receiving and giving. And so above all else, I would say that true holistic medicine must include heart medicine. And that is both on the level of the practitioner, the healer, the guide, whomever is supporting the person, but also the receiver. And even if there is no guide, it's just me, myself, and I, that the state of your heart is really, in terms of your ability to receive, your capacity to receive, and also to generate love, feel that love and self-love, is one of the foundational pillars of true holistic medicine. Now, most ancient and traditional sciences and medicine practices and indigenous life ways, they already knew this, right? They didn't need to relearn this. This was a way of being, and it was understood. And it's in a lot of the foundations of those cultural medicines. And I encourage you, if this is piquing your interest in some way, to maybe pick a tradition, an ancient medical system, or a healing tradition, and look at how they relate to the heart. I think it's so fascinating to see the through lines throughout the world and to see the through lines around the world in these various practices and traditions, and to do a little thought experiment around that. All right, so now moving into the next pillar, I believe that holistic medicine is what I would like to call slow medicine. Now, this is something that actually was coined, maybe not officially in general throughout the world, but I received this concept of slow medicine really through my conversations with my dear friend and colleague, Megan Liebman, who was a co-host on some of our episodes on the podcast and will be coming back. I'm so excited to start back our conversations. But this concept of slow medicine is now, number one, it's not to say that healing can't happen quickly, right? But rather, slow medicine is operating beyond time, beyond the linear time that we operate under today in our world. So often there might be time pressure or the emphasis on the fast lane approach, trying to get that quick fix, right? That pill for an ill, all of these gimmicks that were often sold that do this and, the XYZ will be gone in a few days. Now, that's not to say that that cannot happen, that healing cannot happen quickly, but slow medicine is beyond time. And rather, it's focusing on addressing the roots of one's issues, supporting the layers that are coming up in the correct and divine timing that they are meant to be addressed. And it's about meeting the person where they're at today, presently. We've forgotten that preventative medicine is really another way of just saying, hey, taking good care of yourself on a regular basis and not waiting until you're sick to do so. That is what true holistic health is really about. It's about loving and honoring your body, all of your bodies, in a way where you're consistently nourishing and supporting and cleansing and clearing and revitalizing, not just when you are sick. And when you become sick, that's an indication that there is an imbalance that's being worked out by your body. In slow medicine, there's also not this emphasis on finding a so-called cure. Now, I had mentioned this before, that I do not equate healing to being cured. I think there are different things. You can be so-called cured, as part of your healing, but that doesn't mean that if you don't have a cure that you are not healing. This is not what it really is. To me, healing is a journey of discovery, especially self-discovery, and unfoldings, and unlearning and remembering. So no matter how long it takes, it acknowledges that there is no final destination. There is no final destination when it comes to your health. And with slow medicine, it's honoring the most supportive path and pace for you to discover and to heal. We'll talk more about slow medicine in future podcast episodes. These are just some basic, quick thoughts about it that I feel are connected to this concept, this greater umbrella concept of holistic medicine that I think are really important to connect in with. The other component to holistic medicine is the understanding of and connection to nature, and the understanding that we are nature. We are not separate. There is no separation. That's false. That's an illusion. We are woven into a extremely complex web of life. So it's not just about witnessing nature as a spectator, but participating in the wholeness of who you are and your place in the greater web of the natural world. Today, so many of us have been basically extracted from that understanding and life ways. When we look at traditional and indigenous life ways, these are things that were just a given. This is how you lived. And so there was a much deeper level of understanding of the natural forces and the natural laws, and how through connection and communication, we can really receive so much insight about our own nature and healing. But since I speak in a general sense of we, I'm not talking about everybody, of course, but many folks today are no longer living in those traditional or wild or innate ways of being with nature. And we have to remember how to do it. We have to relearn in a way and reconnect. And so a part of that is observing nature, but observing nature in a way where you are living it. You are also a participant in that wholeness, as I was talking about. So we can talk about ways of doing that a little bit more as I get into discussion around plants and herbs and all of that. But I think it really begins with also looking at what are some of the fears that we might be holding around, or resistance around, this notion that we are nature, or fear when it comes to nature, which is something that I feel like was instilled or taught. And also simply by being disconnected for so long, there's always a natural fear of the unknown. So it's really about getting back into knowing with nature and various ways of starting to do that for yourself. Okay, so I want to move into other pillars and components of what I identify as holistic medicine. And the next two are about honoring the wholeness of the person and also honoring the wholeness of the plants, herbs, medicine, the remedies, the tools, etc., that are being experienced or being recommended or prescribed. Now, honoring the whole person. This is about tending to the body, the mind, the heart, the emotions, the spirit, the soul, the subtle energy, acknowledging that a human and a person is all of those things and more, rather than a reductive machine-like concept of the body and repairing at just that level. When we honor the whole person, it requires us to look at the ecology, what I call the sacred ecology of the person. There's all these different layers and areas of the person and their life that impacts their health and their vitality. It's also honoring the multidimensionality of the person. So it's beyond any checklist. It's beyond templates. And it's about asking deeper questions, being with the person, opening up to their wholeness, and not reducing them to some sort of specimen or something that can be quantified and put under a group or a cohort where then they can just follow this checklist and be fine. That does not work. Now, of course, templates can be helpful, but it's about using them as potential support tools and not as the end-all be-all and the remedy, which is very, very common in conventional medicine and allopathic medicine. I'll give a quick example of this. I have done this before, but I think this is my own personal experience, so I feel this deeply, and I think it's helpful to share. When my mom, Norma, was diagnosed with breast cancer, there was a whole process that they took her down. And we did conventional medicine. This was before I was really in the holistic health world, you could say. And that was my first foray into the conventional medical system. Now, what I witnessed was how they had, based off of the type of cancer she had, a very specific checklist of things that they would run through. And rather than asking my mom about her health history, about her diet, even doing any kind of expansive blood work that could be helpful in understanding what else is going on for her, they took a very reductive approach and simply took her diagnosis and saw her as the diagnosis and walked down the checklist. And each checklist contained a pharmaceutical that they would bring in to test out. And also, in her case, included surgery, where she had a tumor removed, radiation, chemotherapy, and then eventually a mastectomy. Of course, there weren't any questions or inquiries about her mental, emotional state, about her history, or even someone asking her, what does she think about how this came about? What are her thoughts and experiences? What are the things that are really challenging her? What's been stressful? None of that was taken into account. And so this extremely reductive checklist approach brought her down to a point where she was a statistic. And once she went through the entire checklist and they had nothing else beyond the experimental drugs, which she tried and almost killed her, they said, we have no more answers for you. It's time to take a vacation because you're most likely going to die. Now, of course, that's the point where we intervened. And finally, my parents listened to their kids about, hey, maybe we should start looking at some of these other approaches to cancer and wellness to support you. But at that time, there wasn't a ton on the internet because this was over 15 years ago. And this concept of anything that was outside of the conventional medical model was seen as potentially dangerous because it's the unknown, right? And we've been extracted really from these ways of knowing and these connections to ourselves as our whole person and whole beings. that at that point, it was really difficult to turn the ship around, so to speak, because she had gone so far down the conventional allopathic path. Now, that's not to say it's not impossible to do that in cases, and I have seen that in cases, thank goodness. But in her case, it was very difficult, and in terms of even accessibility and feasibility of being able to do some of these alternative methods, seeing these alternative practitioners and treatments, the current system and model does not support financing of those, right? So health insurance usually does not cover most of those types of practices and modalities. And when you run out of money, you run out of money. And so we saw this in my mom's case, and I see it so commonly with people. It's heartbreaking, and this is a systemic issue that I'm not going to get into today, but it's horrifying. And to be denied treatment or practices or support that you know are really helpful and healing, and to be denied the ability to access that, or just not even having a chance of accessing it at all, is a crime in my eyes. Now, in addition to honoring the whole person, we also must look at honoring the wholeness of the medicine that's being brought in, especially when that is of plants, herbs, and energetic practices. Again, having a deep connection and understanding of nature, starting with yourself, is imperative when it comes to honoring the wholeness of not just yourself and the person, but of these medicines that we're bringing in. Now, when we're looking at specifically honoring the wholeness of plants and herbs, it's important to acknowledge that, like us, they too are multi-dimensional. They are sentient beings. They are intelligent. And we can communicate with them. And like us, they are plugged into the greater web of life, including the cosmos, the cosmic and the unseen forces. Now, of course, indigenous traditions and lifeways and ancient medical traditions honor this truth. They operate with this understanding, and there are an unlimited ways of practicing medicine in this way and in honoring the wholeness of these medicines. I think it's really important to begin to establish a relationship, not just with nature in the larger sense that I had talked about, but with plants and with herbs, with the living world around you, including animals. It's wonderful to read up about, let's say, Tulsi or holy basil. I love reading monographs. I love reading about the historical context of holy basil and how folks have been using holy basil and working with holy basil throughout the ages. Also reading up on all the ways that Tulsi can really show up and support the body and the affinities that Tulsi has. However, it is a completely different experience to commune with Tulsi, to be in the presence of a living plant, to seed and grow and tend to this plant and understand, like, where does Tulsi like to grow? What are the conditions in the ecologies that are best for Tulsi? What does Tulsi look like, feel like, smell like, taste like? What are the energetics that you feel when you connect with Tulsi or take Tulsi as a food or a tea or a tincture? Doing a plant set with Tulsi and connecting intuitively through the heart, that heart connection, to communicate with this sentient being. And then looking at those energetics through the lens of the greater context of the cosmos and greater nature of things. Elementally, what does Tulsi connect in with? We can start looking at the astrological connections related to Tulsi. These are just some ways that many of you who love plants, maybe identify as herbalists, are already engaging with. But it's important to speak into this deep connection, and that carving of the space and time for that curiosity and intentional connection is part of the honoring of the wholeness of these plants and herbs, and can bring in that next level of support and healing when it comes to holistic medicine. There are so many beautiful traditions and ancient texts that establish and have a lot of these deeper understandings that you can study. One of the ways that we definitely have seen being extracted from, you could say, modern allopathic herbalism or use of plants, as I talked about with that textbook Rational Phytotherapy. Not that that knowledge isn't helpful in some way, but it's extremely reductive. And so one of the things that we see is that the soul and spirit and energetic aspects of these plants are literally being ignored when utilized in that way. And this is really, really key when we're talking about holistic medicine, because holistic medicine includes supporting one in healing their trauma, their deep wounds, their heart, their energy body. And plants are such beautiful beings that can help support us in tending those spaces. And I see more practitioners and herbalists facing clients, as I had mentioned, that have these really complex and chronic issues. And when we see that, it's not just about increased toxicity level or imbalance of an organ system. It's also about deep wounds and trauma and intergenerational challenges at that energetic level that also need to be tended to. So as more practitioners are really facing clients and folks that understand this, they're walking the path, they want to heal their trauma, their deepest wounds from their past or even past lives, and not even fully understanding it, to overcome the things that are holding them back from that healing that they desire and from feeling a connection with their true self, their purpose, their path in life. There are many different beautiful lineages and practices and ways of bridging that soul and spirit aspect of medicine in with the science and the body. And that's even maybe a little bit of a misnomer, because the body is not really separate from the soul and the spirit, right? So they are all one. But again, there's so many beautiful traditions that you can either start working with yourself or working with practitioners and teachers of these traditions. For example, traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. One of them that I have found really fun and endlessly fascinating is the alchemical tradition. And in my last episode, I talked about some of the most common remedies that were coming up for people in my Akashic readings over the past year and a half. And so many beautiful medicines, in particular flower medicine, which is one of my favorites, and flowers in all ways, like even connecting with flowers, bringing flowers into your home, but also flower essences, as well as spagyrics. And I go a little bit into what spagyrics are in the last episode. But something that's really cool that I wanted to let you know about is that Seja Popham and Whitney Popham, they're the founders of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, are releasing their amazing annual free mini course today. It's called the Herbal Alchemy Training Sessions, and Seja's giving it away to our community right now for free. It opened up today, and he's going to talk a lot about, actually, a lot of the things that I was talking about today, but in specific relationship to the alchemical tradition and what that is and what herbal alchemy actually is. It's a 3-part workshop series, and today the first class is opening up. The mini course is called Demystifying Alchemy. So he will go into what alchemy actually is. And in the overall 3-part workshop series and training, you're going to get insights into how herbs can be used to heal the spirit and the soul without overlooking the body, how to prepare spagyric extracts of herbs that heal the whole person. So I had mentioned the spagyrics in my previous episode. A lot of them, I actually referred the clients to Seja and their spagyric extracts. And he's going to show how to prepare spagyric extracts in his training course. And then also the integration between the science and spirituality of plant medicine. So this is all on topic with what I'm talking about with holistic medicine. If you are interested in diving deeper into this Western alchemical tradition, working with plants. So if you have a calling to provide deeper levels of healing with medicinal plants, then I highly recommend that you check out this free training course. I'm also going to have Seja on next week because I wanted him to go deep into the nitty-gritty of herbal alchemy and the art of spagyrics because it could get complicated pretty quickly. And spagyrics isn't something that a lot of people are aware of or know about, but it's a fascinating approach to holistic medicine through plant work. I have the links to that mini course, the Herbal Alchemy mini course, in the show notes, but you can always go to wildlyrooted.com/herbal alchemy as one word. wildlyrooted.com/herbal alchemy, and it'll take you to the free trainings that you can sign up for. And I believe they're only open for a limited time. So if this piques your interest, make sure you sign up and then you'll get access to those recordings. And there's going to be 3 classes. He goes deep with all of these. I think all of them are over an hour long, and be ready to take notes because there is so much goodness. And I'm a huge fan of this training. I think he's giving so much away for free. It's awesome. So make sure to check that out if you're interested in learning about the alchemical tradition and working with plants in that way, especially if the last episode you heard about the spagyrics was interesting to you as well. To round out this discussion on what true holistic medicine really is, I think the last piece that I want to really speak into is connecting with your intuition. And that holistic medicine, any holistic medicine, is really guided by you. It's guided by your intuitive knowing of what is right and what is aligned. And I know that sometimes that can get fuzzy, especially if you're in a state of pain, of fogginess, of confusion, of frustration. If you've been dealing with chronic ailments and challenges for so long, it can be discouraging. You may feel like you're disconnected from your intuition. And what I would say to that is just know that you always have that ability to reconnect. And it's more around building trust little by little with the little things and reclaiming your autonomy and authority when it comes to your intuition. and what you feel is right for you. We all have those instincts, whether they're gut feelings or intuitive knowings in the heart or hits. As you pay attention to those signals and messages, no matter how subtle and quiet they may be, they will get louder. So where you place your focus and attention grows. This is an energetic law. So if you begin to intentionally connect with yourself, with your intuition, start to pay attention to maybe the very tiny little voice that you hear inside that's telling you, this doesn't feel quite right. Or this practitioner told me this and I don't know that that's true. It doesn't feel true for me. Or, man, this person, I am for some reason attracted to this person's healing work, or the way that they speak really resonates with me. Follow that. And every time you follow those signals and messages, I promise it will get louder and louder, and that connection and your intuitive connection will get stronger. One of the things that I so often see in my own Akashic readings with folks when I'm doing their Akashic record readings is that very often they already know on some level what it is that I'm telling them. Now, that may not be everything that comes out in a session, but there definitely are subtle ways of knowing things that aren't necessarily cognitive or in your brain. Like, you may not have had that thought, but you know it to be true in your body. And so getting a reading, whether it's an Akashic record reading or any other kind of intuitive reading, can actually help you to reestablish and affirm your own connection to your intuitive knowing. That's something I see time and time again. Or if you yourself decide to learn to read your own Akashic records or to start an intuitive practice, no matter what it is, and one of these can be in plant communication and plant sets, that is going to help establish and grow your intuitive connection so that you can be guided by that. You can guide yourself. And that is a component of true holistic medicine that cannot be replaced by anyone or anything. Okay, so I gave you quite a bit. Again, this isn't everything that can be said about holistic medicine. And I actually would love to hear from you, your feedback, your thoughts, your experiences on what true holistic medicine is for you. What does it mean for you? How have you experienced it? And you can always reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is @wildlyrooted. I would love to hear you over there. Comment on the posts connected to this episode, or feel free to DM me with your thoughts. And as always, we appreciate your insight and feedback in the form of a rating and review, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts. It helps us to get out there and connect with more people, to spread the love and to spread the healing to our fellow human family. Be sure to check in with us next week when we have a super juicy conversation with Sage Apapam. Until then, be well. Hey there, I made something for you. One of the biggest challenges that I hear from people is that they are feeling stuck when it comes to their health. You're a smart, capable, and creative change maker, right? And you know what you should be doing for your health. So what gives? Well, it's not about willpower. And I wanted to create something that would help you to unlearn the things that are keeping you stuck so that you can get out of your own way and master the mindset of health. That's why I created Wildly Unstuck, where you'll learn the top 5 things that I have found to sabotage your health goals and what to do about them. You'll learn what it really takes to become committed and unstoppable when it comes to your health goals, and find the clarity you've been looking for so you know exactly what to do to get back into alignment. And I made it totally free. So if this is something that you want to dive into and create a vision and soul goals for your health and your life and bring your gifts to the world, because we know that we need it, then I invite you to join us in Wildly Unstuck. You can find that at wildlyrooted.com/unstuck. I'll see you on the other side.